For the last couple of years, I've been talking mainly about synthesis strategies in geodesign. And today's talk is going to be very, very different. And in a sense, it's a critique of what most of us are doing, which I think is too static and too simple. And I've been working and thinking very hard in the last couple of months about the problem of the dynamics of the real world versus the static aspect of the analysis and design that we do. And what has to be done to make the technical support and the thinking in geodesign more reflect what actually happens in the real world. In a sense, I'm not interested in the computer scientist's view of the world. I'm interested in the designer and planner's view of the world who's actually active in it and working from the perspective of the designer rather than the perspective of data, GIS, geography, the sciences. And so, in a sense, I'm taking a minority view, perhaps, but it's nonetheless my view. And my talk is going to take a certain amount of time, half of it, and then I'm going to show 4 examples, not me, they are going to show 4 examples of dynamics in play, selectively, given the problems that they were facing. The talk is likely to take altogether about an hour and a quarter, not much longer than that and not much less than that. And I can tell you that the $50 and $100 seats are here in the middle, and the people in the back, there are a bunch of graphics in this that you simply won't understand if you're far away. And now's the time to change if you want to, but if you have to leave promptly at 6 o'clock, stay where you are. The term geodesign dynamics is not my invention. It was when I gave a lecture in Madrid, Spain, a couple of years ago. A colleague, a friend of Arantxa's and mine, came to me and said, you know, what you're doing is adding dynamics to design. And I said, that's an interesting set of words, geodesign dynamics, and I've never forgotten it. But nobody's ever defined it. So try number 1. Geodesign dynamics are concepts, they're ideas which relate change in geodesign to its changing system's context. In other words, the important point is any change you make changes everything, except we don't update, we don't iterate the stuff that we begin with when we make a design. Usually. Some do, most don't. And they require technical support. In other words, the technical support grossly lags even the best of it, how decisions get made in the real world. They have time, they have cost, they relate to each other, they're cross-system impacts. We're not working that way. We're working pipelines still. And I started listing all the ways that I could think of, and I've got about 15. And I'm going to show 1 or 2 slides to identify what I mean by these dynamics. And then we're going to show 4 case studies, and there's a 5th that is on the regular program, Allison's project and Rosanna's in Chatham County. Tim is going to talk about Seattle's sustainability, Prashant about making a plan for a World Heritage Site, Orla, who I have on videotape, is going to talk about villagers making their own design with no professional help. And Barty is going to talk about the character of a valley which is being suburbanized. And Allison has to worry about the doubling of savanna under climate change. And as I talk about these ideas, the bottom are the lessons to be learned. A very primitive view, a first draft type view. First of all, we have to recognize that people have differing priorities, but should ultimately agree. That's important. It's really important. It means one designer making one design will never solve the problem. Period. We have to enable varied decision models to define change alternatives and to enable informed negotiation. The end game of geodesign will always in the real world be negotiation. It's not picking the best design from some. It'll be combining ideas and making a new version. It's a messy process. It's a human, social, political process. It's not your brilliance, it's their decision. We have to apply geodesign in varied cultures because they operate differently. And among people with varied local and technical expertise. It's purposeful that we have a case study by villagers, and it's purposeful that we have various professors and professionals doing different kinds of projects. They vary. And we have to assure that every aspect of geodesign support is easy to learn, easy to use, and most importantly, easy to understand. Some of these images are not new, but I'm bringing them up when I want to. I think that architects, landscape architects, do this really, really well. I don't think they need geodesign. I think scientists do this part at the far end really well. They don't need geodesign. Where you really need it is where the designers and the scientists have to come together, and that is these large projects which are semi-private, semi-governmental, semi-individual, semi-tribal, and they have to collaborate. And therefore, geodesign has to be adaptable to varied content in studies and projects. You don't know when you're learning something about geodesign or setting up tools for geodesign, you have no idea what people are going to do with it. So it has to be fundamentally adaptable, which means you have to have empty boxes that people fill in and links to services that they need. You'll never build the ultimate geodesign tool. It will never happen. The dynamics of content, size, and scale. Whatever scale and size and content you're working with, make believe you're here. It affects this one, and it affects that one and that one in the future. And indirectly, it goes out and down and up and down in scale and out in time. But you'll never do a project where you don't have to look up and down zooming. It won't happen. If you really think about the problem, you always have to work at least 3 scales. And that's actually not so simple. If you're making a master plan for Wormsloe State Park, like this, you have to look at the county. But the county is one of several in the coastal zone which is going to be inundated a meter by climate change. So how does Wormsloe, which sits at the cusp of the climate change, not study climate change at the coastal zone level, at the county level, before it deals with its own master plan? Makes no sense. So flexibility of scale, flexibility of models, iterative scale changes. It's very, very important. The dynamics of time and uncertainty. One of the things that's true if you're looking at large projects that have long time is you haven't the foggiest real idea of what's going to happen in the future. So you have to do several designs and try to figure out where truth lies without knowing where it lies. Other people will decide that. But knowing that whatever you decide, the same issue will occur next time. So this design has to be flexible to the possibility of those designs having flexibility. So precision is probably a wrong-headed view. It's probably strategics that are important more than precision. Precision is, there's an old rule, Costanza's law. He's not the first one. The more precise you are, the more wrong you are. All right? I'm a male, but I'm not 6'9". Right? The dynamics of timing and sequence. Every act you make in a design is a function of what happened before, what happened nearby, and what's going to happen next, maybe. And what that means is that, like in Go, in the game of Go, or in music, or in war, or in chess, you make a move by reanalyzing the evaluation models as a function of the previous moves in the game. You certainly don't make an analysis map and keep it for a whole design. That's dumb, because it's changing under your design. And here's a very, very simple example. The chicken and egg. Which comes first, the highway or the shopping center? The sewers or the city? Here is 2 maps. The evaluation map for highway. Green is good, red is bad. And the evaluation map for the shopping center. Green is good, red is bad. Let's say the highway goes first. There's my highway. And now I've got to get a shopping center built. And this was the first version for the shopping center, but because the highway is there, it's changed, you will note, to this. And now I can put my shopping center. In other words, that move updates this map. Not its map, but the other maps. And if you reverse the process, the shopping center goes first. There it is. Now I need a highway. But the first highway map would have put the highway there. But now the shopping center is there, but the highway has to go there. And those two designs are different. They're not the same. That's as simple as it gets. And now you've got 50 designs, 50 things in your design. And you probably ought to update your evaluation map 50 times. Not once, but 50. The dynamics of system interaction. I've purposely taken these diagrams from Google Images. The upper left one says, we know that these activities or these models relate to each other, but we don't know where they are, we don't know how much they are, we don't know if they're good or bad, but we do know they relate. They're boxes with arrows. The upper right one says, we know these processes relate, and they relate in geography. Downhill, uphill, near water, in the wind. But we don't know how much, and we don't know how good or bad it is. The lower left says, we know these processes interact, and we know roughly whether it's a beneficial or a harmful reaction, and we know by the size of it whether it's relatively much or little. And the fourth one says, we know they interact, and we know where, in geography, under the water, on the surface, above the water, which may mean we need three-dimensional diagramming and three-dimensional design in the first place. And we know how much. And I think the fourth one is much too detailed. And so I'm interested in the third one. The first one is useless. The second one isn't enough. The third one, which tells me, is this a good idea or a bad idea? That's what I want. How precise do I want to be? I don't want to be in more than 5 levels. Why? Because most public codes, laws, and regulations are presented to the public and the body politic in 5 levels and in these colors. Massachusetts has water quality which is labeled A, B, C, D, and E. And it's illegal to go from B to C. And people are happy when you go from C to B. But they have no idea how much dissolved oxygen is in the water. And it doesn't matter to them. That's the hydrologist's perspective. It's not the designer's perspective. By the way, I don't want a weighted index. I want an ordinal scale. I want the evaluation to be in an ordinal scale where I specify what needs to be protected and I specify what needs to be changed, and all the positions between have to be judged. It's not the product of a statistical analysis. It's the product of a judgment. So I want ordinal scales. The dynamics of scoping strategy. In the last couple of years, I've been involved with many colleagues, many of you are here, in at least 6 strategic models of scoping a geodesign project. I'll go through them really quickly. I'm afraid one of us is out of focus. It could be me. You have one decision model, meaning 10 systems ranked in some way for priority. You have one scenario, meaning the population is going to double. And you do one design. That's the classic, I've got a client, I've got a site, and I've got a program, and I'm going to make a design. But that doesn't deal with uncertainty. The second one says, I've got one decision model, the client, the mayor, the governor, whatever. But there are several scenarios, several sets in Alan Shearer's definition, several sets of assumptions which tell the story to which the design has to respond. The scenario is not the design. The scenario is the assumptions for the design. Therefore, you need many designs. And then you've got the most interesting problem of all. How do you get from many to one? The third system is you've got one scenario, but many different views of what's important, many political groups. So each one of those can make its own design. Don't expect these people to agree. Expect them to disagree. Make their own designs, and then you've got the problem of how do you get to various views to one design. The fourth one is you've got several decision models, but they each lead to a sequence of changes over time, two views of the future that are staged. So you might have two designs, but they're in time stages, and you have to reconcile different time stages of different attitudes, different scenarios. The fifth one, you've got one decision model, but many combinations of resources, policy, political will, etc. Each one of which has to be judged as an abstraction, and each combination of things creates a scenario, and each one of those needs a design, and you still have to come to one. And the final one, which is much more common than people will admit, and that is you have the scenario, you're speculating on the combinations, you're making the designs, and you're presenting them to let the client figure out what they really want. And then you can make a design. I've done them all. So the idea, I and my friends have done them all. So the idea that one design comes out is wrong. You're more likely to need a workflow in which groups of people say what's important, and then people who know a lot about the systems, and that's these people, they have to organize their data, their process models, their evaluation models, but they're likely to be 5, 6, 4, 10 designs, because each group has its own view of the world, and those are all different. Those diagrams are all different. And then you have to go from the synthesis stage to the problem of comparison. And so for the last 6 months, one of the things that Hrishi Ballal and I have been spending a lot of time on is not making the design, but how do you decide when you have a bunch of designs what to actually propose? And those are support tools that Geodesign desperately needs. Tools for comparison and tools for negotiation. And that's what we're trying to build very rapidly. Now, the workflow itself, we've talked about this many times here. These are the things that turn out to be very important in my judgment. The first one is that some of these process models inside Geodesign software, including ours, are purposefully simple. But these people are experts, and they've got models that are very complicated. And so you need a balance between having simple models to do diagrams and preliminary sketching, but you need access to very complicated models. So you need a way, through APIs or otherwise, of linking to external things, external services, external models, but don't try to build them into your software. It's foolish, because they're changing every day. The second thing that's important, don't accept the distinction between analysis and design and synthesis. The people who did the analysis part, building the evaluation process models and the evaluation, they know more about these subjects than you do. So get them to give you ideas. Get them to give you the ideas. Don't make that distinction between they, the scientists, and us, the designers. That's madness. And then anybody can add more diagrams. The mayor can add diagrams. Why not? And you have to be willing to deal with many kinds of synthesis. That's all on videotapes. I don't have to go through it. But I will say this, that if you're working in this middle scale where there is uncertainty, the combinatorial and constraining methods are the best ones to use. Don't try sketching. It won't work. The problem is too complicated. And the language is different. This can be done easily in sketching, a small project. Easily. Sketching won't help you when you're dealing with the globe. You need rule-based and mathematical models. But in the middle scale, systems-based diagrams, I think, are the best way to work. The fastest, the simplest, the roughest. But you can't do that when you're presenting a final design. You have to switch to a technology that works in detail. Diagrams are not details. Diagrams are an easy way to start thinking about a problem. But we're not building tools for diagrams, except we are and a couple of other teams. The next way that it really matters is, let's say that this is the existing conditions and you decided this diagram is a good idea. That diagram by itself updates the evaluation model and it has an impact. Supposing you have a group of diagrams, let's say your green infrastructure plan. That group updates all the evaluation models, and it has an impact. And finally, you have a final design. It has whatever you think you're supposed to be doing. And it updates the evaluation models and the impact models. But that process of updating and testing impacts is continuous. Now, it's not convenient because it takes time. But in the real world, you build anything and it updates the world. The other thing that's important is to be able to recognize the difference between a simple model and a complex model and know when you need it. And sometimes they're in regulations which do require you. Tim has a problem that he has to decide whether the salmon are alive or well in the future. It's a model. It's not a model that we can deal with inside a GIS software. It has to be outside. And finally, you have to have feedback, change of scale capabilities, and a way of showing it to people who need to decide if it's a good idea. I'm sorry, I wanted to say something else. And that process of saying, I've got 6 designs coming out of 6 different decision models, now I have to figure out how I'm going to compare them in order to make a decision. And I think that's crucial, absolutely crucial. The design is not the final product. The decision is the final product. To say it's a good thing, let's make it happen. And there are lots of ways of comparison. We could look at what they think is important, we can look at the design, we can look at timing, we can look at cost, we can look at system impacts, we can look at cross-system impacts. What does your change not do for your system, but for everybody else's system? We could look at where, which, and whose impacts are what. We could look at certainty versus uncertainty. We could look at frequency of selection. If everybody agrees it's a good idea, maybe it's a good idea. And we can build negotiation tools. All of these ought to be available. In fact, they are available. But it's not a good design just because you made it. That's for sure. The visualization dynamics. Well, it's very useful to work in 2 dimensions. 3 dimensions, by the way, I think 3 dimensions is the wrong definition. It's really useful to work in 2 dimensions. People have done it for 10,000 years. But you need standard color codes and standard words and standard things. It has to be standardized. You can't have every person in a collaboration invent their own language, their own color for something. It's a Tower of Babel. It's an old story, but it works badly, the Tower of Babel. I think the 3rd dimension is time and not height. So what you need to do is be able to record how something is supposed to change over time. I think the 4th dimension is height, and the 5th one is motion, and we've done them all. I mean, this is an example from Eric Whitner, 2012 City Engine, a very early version of City Engine, in the Soma, Japan example. But there's no time record. Whereas I think you need to keep track of the time of every piece of your design. I think that what I've been talking about is based on the idea that all aspects of geodesign workflow are dynamic. All of them are dynamic. And all update and change as the design is being made. I think that's what we should be aiming for. And I think this is generic to anybody's software, Esri's, anybody's. You need to have a workflow that has roughly those characteristics, including tools for negotiation support. And I think externally, you need a source of data, GIS operations, modeling capability, and visualization. And I think that that problem is more important because these people are also changing and you need the links. And therefore, I'm interested, frankly, in focusing on supporting the workflow at the beginning and diagrammatic stages of geodesign when all aspects of the geodesign workflow are most dynamic and all aspects can rapidly update or change as the design is being made. And keep it as simple as possible, easy to learn, set up, use, and most importantly, understand. So this is the strategy of what I've been working on and with Hrishi, and well, Hrishi's been doing the work, and testing in workshops for the last year. You have to work 10 systems, and this is arbitrary. I've talked about this last year. It's all on videotape. You want to work simultaneously in 10 systems. Not 1, not 3, but 10. 100 is too much. Some of those need externally linked models. Why? Because you need the complicated model and not the simple one. You have lots of different dimensions of decision making. And I think you need at least 6. And any one of them can go through versions. Version, 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 and change scale. Change scale. In any number of sizes and scales. And eventually you're going to produce 6 alternatives or fewer, maybe more. And you're going to have to say, how do I get from 6 to 1? And that's the piece that is the most important piece that we're weakest at. We all believe we're making one design. But what if you're making 6? Or what if they're making 6? Or 50, for that matter. And furthermore, all the evaluation models are in no more than 5 levels, and all the impact models are in no more than 5 levels, and they're in different color sets. Why? Because it's easy for people to track them. And we're going to work in diagrams. And what I want to show you now is I want to follow a diagram through a design. Diagram. A graphic that explains rather than represents. That's important. That was Stephen Irvin's paper on the very first Geodesign conference. I'm not trying to represent data. I'm trying to explain how it works, which is quite different. Diagram, a graphic that explains rather than represents, especially a drawing that shows arrangement and relations. That's exactly what I want. I want arrangement and relation. So here are my 10 evaluation maps. By the way, red means I have to protect it. Green means I have to change it. That's what it means. We're sort of redefining what the color code is. And so first of all, I can take all of these evaluation maps and combine them in various ways and overlay them. We all know how to do that. And because of this combination of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these maps, I'm going to say I need to really protect this area right in here. And so I'm making a diagram, and I'm going to draw that diagram. And this diagram is associated with 2 things immediately: time and money. And that time is manipulable. It's a tool. I can say delay it 5 years and then make it in 10 years, and the costs associate themselves on a very simple model, on a unit-based model that Tim, in his work, set up with his graduate students. It counts the amount of area, it gives a unit cost, it divides it, and it's done. It's really simple. It's not a big calculation. So this diagram, I say, I like this diagram. And so there it is. You see it really small? And you see it among about 200 diagrams. You just scroll down, you see all the diagrams. So there's my diagram on top of the existing land use in Savannah, Georgia, and Chatham County. And the black is land that I'm not supposed to touch on any grounds at all because people are living there. And now what I've done is I've taken that diagram and I've asked Allison, who's out in the audience somewhere, to send me from a GIS operation that she has all the buffer zones of all the water in the county. It's not in my software. I don't want it in my software. I want the results in my software, and I want it colored in the color that I want to color it. And I can then say, let's get the impacts of this, and I can do all kinds of things. The impact of that one move, that's the only thing that's happened. Nothing has happened here. It has its own impacts. They're purple, they're good, but it has impacted all the other systems, and some don't like it. The housing people don't like that conservation strategy because I'm taking the land out of the marketplace. So its diagram is orange, which is bad. The ecologists like it because it's good, it's purple. So this analysis tells me whatever move you make, some people are going to be against you. And you build your coalition. And that one move changes the existing evaluations. This line down here is the same as that one, but those are the new ones. Press a button, updates. So now I can do the next part of my design. And I'm going to do the next part of my design. There's the next part of my design. There's the same diagram. There it is. There it is. but now I've added 50 other diagrams. 50 other diagrams, each with a timeline, and each with a budget of a total cost that diminishes and an annual cost given the project start at different times. And it goes through the same process. Now, I've now done lots of different things, accumulated the impacts, and I still have good things going on, and some people are going to be very angry at what I'm proposing. And finally, the piece of property that I'm really interested in is the upper left-hand corner. So I can zoom in and I say, all these things are going in the county, but only these things are going in my site. And they have a cost, and that's a cost that I might be taxed on. Something like that. So that's one diagram, just following through. And I'm going to do these workshops with Hrishi and Tess and others in anywhere from 6 hours to 2 days, with 30 people working simultaneously anywhere in the world, collaborating. Because I'm not the designer at these projects. These guys are running the workshops. They're running the workshops. So the first question is the why in the framework. Why are we doing this? And you need an interesting question. This is the question of the 4 case studies we're going to show you. The first one is Tim's. Are the King County, that's Seattle, King County, are the King County growth management regulations sustainable? They think they are, but are they? That's his case study. The second one is Prashant. In the 15th and 16th century, Hampi, India was one of the world's largest cities, this thing. How should the Hampi UNESCO World Heritage Area in Karnataka, India, manage growing tourism and regional prosperity? India is growing fast. Tourism is going to come. What should they do? The third case study is Orla. I'm going to present it with her. She's going to be on videotape. This is a village of 250, Mulranny, Ireland. How should Mulranny, Ireland, a village of 250 people, grow and change in the future? This is one where the villagers made the designs by themselves. The fourth one, Barty's. How can the southern Cache Valley, Utah, double in population by 2030 and conserve its rural character? And finally, Allison is going to talk tomorrow about how can Chatham County, Savannah, Georgia, double in population by 2050 and respond to climate change? And how can Wormslow State Park respond to doubling tourism and climate change when that's what's going to happen according to the National Oceanographic and Space Agency? All of these projects require some things in front. You have to decide on your study area, you have to get existing data, you have to build evaluation models, which, as I said, is an ordinal scale where people have to judge what should be protected and what should be changed. They have to build the impact basics of what each kind of system does to the evaluation models and the basics of what each system does to every other system and a simple cost model and produce a set of evaluation maps. And finally, they're ready to begin their work. These are the projects that we're going to do in the next 4 months, roughly one a month. And we're selecting these because they're really different. This is Arizona State University West Campus, the Thunderbird Medical Center, and the Thunderbird School of Global Management in a totally developed part of Phoenix, which the schools want to collaborate. And the question is, what kind of change in the environment will enable that collaboration to be symbolically understandable and functional? The second one is, what do you do with the way of Jesus from Nazareth to the Sea of Galilee? It's rapidly growing Christian and Muslim Arab villages on the northwest and rapidly growing Jewish villages and towns and cities on the southeast. And the Christian pilgrims go on the Roman road between them. And how do you make this feel to the Christian pilgrims like it's the path that Jesus trod? That's the problem. The next one is, you're going to see the Savannah one, but we have been asked by the Coastal Zone Commission to study 10 counties, each making their own plan, each linking to a geodesign study, and we're going to do that with the University of Georgia and the Georgia Coastal Commission in April. So we're going to deal simultaneously at 4 scales. The final one is all of Sardinia. The next, actually, it's not the final one. There are two more. One is UCL, the University College London, is building a huge campus on the site, part of the site of the Olympic Park in London, in partnership with Intel. And the question is, how do you make a campus design in a geodesign framework? And for that, you need three-dimensional diagrams and three-dimensional impact models. That's not simple. We've tested that, but we don't know how to do it really. And finally, the last one. 7,000 square kilometers, the Quadrilatero Ferroviário in Minas Gerais, Brazil, which is the largest domestic producer of iron. It's a miserable environment. And right in the middle of it is Ouro Preto, which is a World Heritage Site. What now? And what we're going to basically do is not be in the data business, not be in the GIS business, not be in the external model business, not be in the visualization business, but we're really going to try hard to make the design process easier. Thank you. Thank you. We're around. Ask us questions tomorrow. Thanks for coming.